Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of r/entitled people stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. Karen posted a rude TikTok of my mother, so I got her fired. After that, won't fix the ramp, but give me the ability to close it? Okay then. And after that, am I the jerk for refusing to pay half of my boyfriend's mortgage? Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen gets her TikTok deleted. I don't have a TikTok. My IQ is above 50. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. Karen posted a rude TikTok of my mother, so I got her fired. May sound implausible, but setting, coffee shop in small town America. Most people know each other, so not really that out of the ordinary. There's a nice indie cafe a few blocks from my house, which I, 28 male, go to a couple of times weekly. Servers all know me. This month, I had my mom with me, her visiting the US for the first time. Mom spent all her life in a Southeast Asian country. Her English is not good, etc. Anyway, I go to work one day last week. Mom wanders over to the cafe. I get home that night, ask Mom how her trip to the cafe was. She says it's nice, told me what she got, and oh no, I forgot she doesn't know about tipping here. Where she lives, there's a large service charge included, so you don't really tip in eateries. And definitely not in small ones. Completely my bad, and entirely my fault for forgetting to inform her. I ask her which server. She describes someone I know as Jane, around 25, female. I go to the cafe the next day. The minute it opens, I see Jane is working, and I apologize profusely. Explain that my mom doesn't know about tipping and give her a 70% tip. Bill came up to around $10, so it really wasn't breaking the bank. She's understandably slightly cool, but I apologize to the best of my ability. I thought that was that. No, 2 days later, a colleague texts me a link to a TikTok. Jane apparently has a sizable TikTok following where she talks about being a barista, her customers, how to make X or Y drink. Nice stuff. Except a video from the day my mom visited, where Jane videoed the back and side of her head, made jokes about people coming over from who knows where, and not tipping because it's man-eat-dog world out there. Quietly barked on video. She didn't seem to notice it was at her. Lots of shares and likes and comments, by the way. Gave her the benefit of the doubt. Went over the next day and politely asked her to take it down. She said no, it's her right, and it was her degrading experience. Manager comes over. Jane tells the tipping part and that she made a video out of desperation and she wouldn't take it down. I tell manager that I came back, apologized, tipped her 70%, and explained my mom didn't know. I showed her the TikTok, and manager's face changes. She doesn't discipline Jane in front of me, but from what I hear, she was let go immediately. Now her mother is posting on her own and my Facebook, as well as hinting on the community Facebook group about certain people not respecting servers and causing Jane to be fired. Several people, many who don't know the whole story, are agreeing with her, even discussing setting up a collection. Almost total belief that I am the jerk. No mention of TikTok. Am I the jerk? Should I have dragged my 70-year-old mom in to apologize to Jane? What exactly can I do now? Edit. Thank you so much to everyone who's commented and reassured me, and also for the awards. It's very kind of you, and I'm definitely feeling much better about Jane losing her job, as I realize it's not exactly my fault. I've reported the videos to TikTok, and so have some friends. Hopefully they'll take it down, but I have a screen-recorded copy of it. I've also made the decision not to tell my mom the details of the argument per se, as she's leaving to see my brother in a few days anyway, and I don't want to upset her by telling her about Jane's horrible behavior, as it would just set her on edge. She's in her 70s and not online/English speaking, so wouldn't come across the TikTok anyway. Not the jerk. Tipping isn't mandatory, and it should have ended at that. Jane was not only unprofessional, she didn't have to make it personal either. Jane did the true and tired, messed around and found out. The firing is the result of her own actions. Won't fix the ramp, but give me the ability to close it? Okay then. A few years ago, I ended up working at a remote work site. The crew I worked with had multiple jobs, one of which was unloading the truck that came in once a week with all of the site's food. The unloading area was at the back of the kitchen and hadn't been designed well originally. It was an uneven gravel ramp which led up to a roughly 4-foot loading dock. In an ideal world, the truck would be able to back up to the loading dock and the job would be reasonably easy. However, the ramp also wasn't very wide. There was a dog leg in the run up to it, and also the truck would be at an angle, so moving the pallets of food would be tough. So the workaround was to have a forklift take the food from the truck, drive up the gravel ramp, and drop the food on the dock. When I first got there, we had a forklift operator who had worked with a forklift for years. He was good, like really good. He made it seem easy. This wasn't my first job working around forklifts, and I really appreciated how good this guy was. I'm not sure how many others, especially management, realized that he made this short but tricky run in the forklift look way easier than it actually was. He left, and management scrambled to get another guy licensed to drive the forklift. This guy didn't have the experience, and he struggled. He lost a load off his forks at one point, and it was kinda scary. He was a yes man, and there weren't many other options, so he persevered. A lot of us were worried it was just a matter of time before he tipped the forklift over the edge of the ramp. The solution would have been to redesign the ramp, or at least pave it. The gravel was a large part of the problem. It was a little thick, so the tires would spin, a bit off kilter, and it would develop potholes. The forklift needed to get a run up to carry speed up this ramp. That's how bad it was. We complained, but the company didn't want to do anything because they were building a new kitchen on the other side of the camp, so this one was going to be decommissioned. However, there had been zero work done on the new kitchen in the 3 to 4 months I'd been there. This remote site was in Australia, and they have some pretty strict health and safety laws there. Companies will often have you fill out cards every day of what we saw that was maybe dangerous. I filled out one for this ramp every single week we had to use it, but they didn't do anything. The system was really there to cover themselves, i.e., you knew it was dangerous, it says here on the card, so why did you keep doing the thing? While also expecting us to keep doing the thing. How else were we going to get the food inside? However, one of the other rules pretty much gave the right for any employer to tag out something that isn't safe. The company can't overrule this, as if they do, and then something happens, it's on them. These tags are normally used with machinery, i.e., the machine is broken, can't be used until it's fixed. The tag-out system is not really designed for an area. Cue malicious compliance. The ramp is broken/dangerous. I decided I'm going to tag it out. I collected some cones and ropes and tagged it out. Went straight into the office to tell management what I did. Their faces were priceless. They had a week to come up with a solution, as I did this immediately after we had unloaded the weekly food drop. At first, they told us that from now on, we'd have to walk the boxes of food up to the storage areas. This was obviously an attempt to turn the other crew members on me. However, the cooks stopped that idea in its tracks. The weather was hot, the majority of the food was chilled or frozen. We were only so many. There would have been a lot of food waste. So after a day or so, they got to work putting in a paved path for the forklift. It was the bare minimum they would do, because they were building a new kitchen. But apparently it cost them $7,000 and pulled guys away from other duties to do it. Needless to say, I was not a popular person, and I heard that some of management wanted to fire me, but there was nothing they could do. I left 2 months later anyway. Am I the jerk for refusing to pay half of my boyfriend's mortgage? My boyfriend, 29 male, and I, 22 female, recently decided to move in together. We've been together for 1.5 years. I'm currently renting an apartment, and he has a house that he bought just before we started dating. Before moving in together, we thought it would be best to discuss finances. He's a doctor, and I'm a social media manager. He told me how much he makes, and it was more or less what I expected. When I told him how much I make, he kind of laughed and said I'm supposed to tell him how much I make per month, not per year. I told him, no, that's how much I make per month. His shock was understandable to me. I make 150% of his salary. I told him that it's just because I work for a client in a country where the currency is nearly 20 times stronger. If I had this same job in our country, I would only make a quarter of what he does. I don't live an extravagant lifestyle, so you wouldn't be able to tell that I make as much money as I do by just looking at me. I still live in a small apartment that I got when I was making less than 20% of what I make now, and I never learned how to drive. I know. So I don't have a car and get around exclusively by e-hailing services. Once the initial shock wore off, he said that's great, because now I can pay half of his mortgage. I was a little taken aback by that. I mean, it's not like I wasn't going to contribute to the household at all. I would have been happy to buy groceries, pay utilities, and cook and clean because my workload is much lighter than his. I told him this and that I wouldn't pay half of his mortgage. He retorted that since I make so much more than him, that the least I could do is just pay half the mortgage and that we could go half on groceries and utilities. I told him that that's a little unfair because if we break up, he gets a house and I'm left with nothing, and that if that's going to be the case, I would rather stay in my apartment. I offered up a compromise. His house is sparsely decorated to say the least. He has 2x1 seat couches, a table that's too big, and a TV that's too small. Oh, and a bed. He's never really there, so I get it. I told him that I would furnish the entire house and get the groceries, cook and clean, and we'd go half on utilities, but he still insisted that I pay half of the mortgage. He said that I still need a place to live, and that if I was going to be paying rent anyway, paying his mortgage would be the same thing. He said I'm being the jerk for not wanting to pay it. My boyfriend is a smart man, so I don't know if he doesn't see the logic, or lack thereof in my opinion, of what he's saying, or if I'm being dumb and it's not a big deal. Am I the jerk for not wanting to pay half of my boyfriend's mortgage? Note, I would have been happy to pay half of his rent. It's not about the money, it's about the principle. Edit 1. I will come back to add more information when I have some time. But for now, I will say that half the mortgage he wants me to pay is 3 times my current rent. Not the jerk. Please continue to live on your own terms, but your own place, or pay rent. Your boyfriend isn't even interested in figuring out what your reasonable portion of rent would be. He just wants to cash in on your help. He sounds entitled. Not the jerk. The only way you pay half the mortgage is if you're on the actual mortgage. Most of the time, half the mortgage is going to be below half the market rate of renting an equivalent space, even with escrow for property taxes factored in. If she doesn't want to live with him, she shouldn't pay. But if she's planning to move in, half the mortgage is probably a fair rental amount. None of you even have a clue how mortgages work. When people say mortgage payment, they usually mean escrow. Property tax is hundreds plus every month, insurance, and then the mortgage payment, which early on pretty much only hits interest and not even the principal. So no, you don't just get the money back. You also lose 7% of the value paying both realtors when you sell. So you can actually sell a house and have to write a check. People can literally be too poor to sell their homes. I don't think a lot of these comments even understand the basic math behind renting or owning. The system we have currently is bad. That doesn't mean you should stiff your homeowning partner because you don't understand how mortgages work. And even if they do get some of that money back, who cares? You lived there, likely for much less than rent on your own. Entitlement and ignorance is off the charts with some of you. No, very much not the same. He will be getting the money back when he sells the house. Not the case with a lease. These posts always drive me nuts. Of course she should pay half the mortgage. It's rent. She shouldn't have to pay HOA fees, property tax, repairs, etc. I did this with my husband before we got married. It's fine. I don't expect to live for free. I paid rent to him. If you have roommates, they pay rent. The fact you're hooking up shouldn't change that. Yes, it made him my landlord, I guess. But if your dude isn't a jerk, he's not going to use that position to take advantage of you. If that's the case, you shouldn't be together anyway. Because he already owns the house, she has a lot less say in budget. A fair compromise would be him renting his house out and then them both finding a place they were happy with together. Please stop, Reddit boy. I can't take any more of these comments. Renting the house out and finding an apartment that they like? I just can't take this lack of logic. We're on Reddit, Karen. This ain't the place you want to go if you're looking for logic. My parents always expect my wife to babysit for them. Originally, my wife, who's 29, was I'm 29, little brother's babysitter. He's 8 years old now. This was a little over 6 years ago. My parents, who are 45 and 46, hired her and she accepted as a short-term gig so that she could make extra money to pay for her last college courses she needed to graduate. Me and her spent some time together when she was at my parents'. I fell hard for her, then a few months after she stopped working for them, we started going out. Accidentally got pregnant only a couple months later, but we made it work. Our son is 5, and my wife just had our second son 4 months ago. Every time we come over, I've noticed this. If my brother needs help with something, they ask her if she can do it. Like he says he's bored and wants to play. They ask her if she could play a board game with the kids while we stay in the kitchen talking. And I've told them, that's ridiculous. We're both here to visit. The past few months, my parents called to ask if maybe she could come over and watch my brother for a few hours. A couple times every so often isn't the issue because I get it. Every parent needs a break, and we don't mind my little brother coming to hang out with us and his nephew. The issue is they call her regularly, even after we have another kid ourselves that we're busy taking care of. My wife is more tired of it now that we are both exhausted taking care of our 4-month-old. And this isn't anything new because I've talked to them about it. They say it's a habit when they got so used to her being their go-to sitter, even though she stopped working as a sitter years ago. We went over to their house recently so they could spend time with both their grandkids. They haven't met our youngest yet, so it was meant to be a nice get-together. But, surprise, they said they needed to leave in an hour for an appointment and asked if we could stay to watch my brother. I told them we had things to do after this, and they go, "Well, Michelle can stay and watch him then." My wife was annoyed. I was annoyed. She took the kids to the car, and I told them to stop expecting her to be their babysitter when there are thousands of other people they can hire, and they really ticked us off, thinking we were all gonna hang out so they could spend time with their grandsons. They were more focused on the fact that we weren't staying to help them with my brother because they really needed to go. Last thing I told them was, we are done visiting until they can stop acting like my wife is their babysitter. You can imagine how ticked off they are. It's hard because they're my parents, and right now they think I'm a jerk for withholding them from their grandkids just because they asked for a favor. I'm really done with all this, to be honest, but I don't know if they're right. Am I the jerk? Not the jerk. You are laying down a boundary, and good for you. It's hard sometimes, but definitely clapping for you, and so glad you're sticking up for your wife. Especially when OP's wife has 2 kids of her own to take care of full time, one just a few months old. She's worn out from her own duties. Put it to them this way. If you stopped working at a movie theater, wouldn't it be weird for your boss to call you up and ask you to come clean the place? If you retired from construction, wouldn't it be weird for someone to hand you a yellow vest and point you towards some cement? Do they call people they used to work with? What about old doctors no longer in practice? No? There you go. They just don't respect her or you. Not the jerk. Table stayed 1.5 hours past closing and tipped 10%. I work at a casual, upscale sushi restaurant, and we close at 11 p.m. on Saturdays. Two Top comes in at 7:30 p.m., saying they were waiting for 2 more. They waited an hour for the other 2, and right after they sat down, the original 2 asked what time we closed, to which I replied 11. All's fine and well. They ordered a lot of food and drinks. Turned out to be some kind of business merger. 11 p.m. comes around, and they're still talking. Half the food is not touched. 11:15 comes around, and I asked if they needed any to-go boxes, as the food was still untouched, to which they replied, "Oh no, we'll be finishing it." 11:30 p.m. comes around, and I place the check on the table. Hilariously, everyone simultaneously put a bite of food in their mouth, even though I had been watching them like a hawk and knew they hadn't touched their food since 11. They were my last table, and all my side work was done. 11:45 p.m. comes around, and I asked if the check was ready, knowing darn well it wasn't, because I hadn't seen anyone touch the checkbook. They proceed to fight over the check, and the 2 that arrived an hour late gave me their card. I process their payment and return it to them. 12 a.m. comes around and I return, gently reminding them that we closed at 11 p.m. and that they are the last guests in the restaurant. The dishwashers were gone, so I knew I was going to have to wash all the dishes that were still on their table. They acted like they were surprised and said they'll be out of my hair soon. 12:15 a.m. comes around, and I just bring them a bunch of to-go boxes and bags because, forget it, I want to leave. 12:17 a.m. comes around, and my manager decided to step in. He told them that all the remaining staff were waiting for them to leave, and that if they enjoyed our restaurant, to return during normal business hours. They acted surprised again and stood up, gathering their coats and stuff. I bust their table and wash all their dishes. 12:30 comes around. I finish their dishes, and they're still talking while standing up around the table. Seriously, can't you do that outside? I start sweeping super close to them, and then they leave. Their bill was $588, and they left me $50. Edit. I get paid $1 above minimum wage and make about $200 to $400 a night, so I'm very comfortable here and don't mind doing extra work. The dishwashers leave at a certain time. I'm pretty close with them, and I wasn't doing anything except waiting for the guests to leave, which is why I did the dishes. Also, I generally don't mind guests overstaying because I have always been tipped very well. But this table stayed from 7:30 to 12:30 and tipped me 10%. So that's why I'm big mad. It's a huge failure on your manager's part to allow this to happen. I'm sorry you work for such an ineffective manager. OP. Honestly, because we're slightly upscale, we tend to get a lot of people that overstay their welcome for some reason. Once we had multiple parties stay 2 hours past closing. This one was just particularly bad because they were the last ones in the restaurant, like since 11:10 p.m., so everyone was just waiting for them. Am I the jerk for taking my oldest kid to my sister's child-free wedding? I'm still shocked this whole thing happened, but I want to hear some outside perspectives, so here I am. I have 4 kids who are 11, 14, 16, and 19. A while ago, we all received an invitation for my sister's wedding. That's me, my husband, and all 4 of my kids. Her wedding was in a different country, but it was at a good time, so we could all go. We booked everything and were all ready to go. We got there a bit of time before the wedding, quite literally a few days before the wedding. I was informed it was going to be a child-free wedding. Look, I have no issue with child-free weddings, but I was a bit frustrated. I mean, if I had known it was going to be a child-free wedding, then arrangements could have been made so that we all didn't have to travel. We were all invited, so I was just annoyed that things were switched up. But I can also understand that weddings can be stressful and sometimes things are going to change. I spent quite a bit of time trying to find a place for my 3 youngest to stay during the wedding, but I sorted it all out eventually. Okay, it was wedding day. No more changes had been made, everything was good. We were on our way when I get a message that my sister was excited to see U2. I was a bit confused because, of course, 3 of us were going. I just decided it was probably an error and didn't worry. We got there, and my sister seemed very surprised to see my oldest, and not a nice surprised either. A pretty condescending surprised. But again, it's her wedding day, she's probably nervous. I'll let it go. During the wedding, I couldn't help but feel she was ignoring us. I don't know, if none of this ever happened, I wouldn't even care because, again, it's her wedding, and she doesn't have to pay equal attention to everyone. But with everything else, it just felt weird. After the wedding, she sent me a message that it was nice to see me there, but she would have appreciated it if I had respected the child-free part. I replied saying I was so happy for her and enjoyed every second of the wedding, and I thought I had respected it, but if there was a miscommunication, I was very sorry. She told me that there was no miscommunication, that I had disrespected her and I should apologize. I basically reiterated what I had already said and didn't apologize. Am I the jerk? Edit. For those wondering about the invitation RSVP, the invitation said, bride and groom would like to invite all 6 of our names, and we were all asked to RSVP by email, which I did. I had also seen my sister between this and the wedding, and it was clear she knew we were all planning to attend. And yes, this is about my 19-year-old. I use the definition of kid as son or daughter, not as under 18. Sorry for the confusion. Not the jerk. So the wedding wasn't initially child-free, and they just decided that it was a couple of days before the wedding, after you had traveled with all your kids, when she had initially invited everyone? That's messed up. Your sister needed to communicate that it was child-free well in advance if that's what she wanted. That's not the kind of thing you spring on your guests last minute. Also, a 19-year-old isn't a kid, so you didn't take a child to a child-free wedding. Honestly, I don't know what your sister was thinking. This whole affair sounds like a mess. Am I the jerk for not snowblowing the new neighbor's driveway? Our old neighbor, Mr. B, passed last year. He was a very sweet old man, kind of like the neighborhood grandpa. He was a widower, and the last couple years started having mobility issues. When it snowed, we would go over with a snowblower and clear his driveway and salt the walk. In the summer, if I was out mowing, I would do his lawn too. When his health went downhill, we got his groceries and would bring him meals. When he passed, we continued to mow the lawn and take care of the outside of the house when it was vacant. His kids were very appreciative and thanked us for taking care of Mr. B when they could not be there. They eventually sold the house, and the new neighbors moved into the house in the fall. We introduced ourselves and did the standard neighbor greeting. We noticed they didn't have any lawnmowers or snowblower, so we told them that they should get those things sooner rather than later since we typically start getting snow in November. A few times when I was out mowing, the neighbor asked me to mow their lawn, and I obliged, but I told them that they should really consider getting their own yard tools or calling a service. We just had a huge snowfall and are expected to get more this weekend. The neighbor came to my house early on Sunday morning and banged on my door, asking when I was going to be out snowblowing, as they needed to get to work. I told the neighbors that I was not going out to shovel or snowblow anytime soon, so they may want to dig their cars out so they could get to work. He told me that they didn't have any shovels and explained that they were relying on me to come over and take care of it. I told him that I was not planning on doing that. Told him that he could borrow a shovel if he would like, but I was going back to bed. When I did go out to shovel and snowblow several hours later, I did not do their driveway. The neighbors are now angry at me, and he confronted me outside, saying that it's my fault that they had to call out of work. My wife thinks I should have sucked it up and went over, but I told her that I am not a landscaping service and that I should not have to wake up early and shovel their driveway. Am I the jerk for not snowblowing for the neighbors? Not the jerk. We have a similar situation, but we are the new neighbors. We bought from an elderly couple, and the guy next door is about my dad's age and retired early, and he's constantly outside doing yard work, etc. He had been taking care of the yard, snow, etc. for the previous owners for some time. When we bought the house, we couldn't move in right away, and the yard got long, and one day when we saw him, he offered to mow our lawn when he did his on his ride-on mower. We asked if we could pay him. He insisted we do not. All was fine. But as soon as we were able to move in, my husband started mowing the lawn. We gave the neighbor and his wife a small gift to thank them for being so welcoming, and we've maintained a super friendly relationship. It snowed last week, and my husband was still at work when the neighbor was clearing his property, and I looked out the window and saw that he noticed my daughter and I were home alone, and he did my sidewalk for me, which was super nice, but we had never expected. These people sound crazy entitled. It's like they were sold the house thinking it came with a neighborhood lawn service. Am I the jerk for telling my younger brother he needs to find somewhere else to live? My little brother, who's 16, has been living with me for a little over a year now. Our parents kicked him out due to their strong beliefs, and I couldn't not take him in. He's my baby brother. My partner set a few ground rules when he moved in. No parties. His rent would be our weekly grocery bill, and if he could look after our two kids, who are 6 and 10, while we're both working late, that would be amazing, and there would be no guests in our home. He agreed to all of these conditions and was holding up to them very well until recently. My brother recently got a new boyfriend, who we have met a couple of times, and he seems really sweet, but we don't know him really well yet. Anyway, my partner and I were working late the other night, and he called me to find out if his boyfriend could come around, and I told him I'd rather he didn't be around my kids while we were not there. He seemed fine with it, and I thought nothing of it. However, when I got home, there was his boyfriend, sitting on the couch with him. I didn't disturb them because his boyfriend seemed emotionally distressed. He was crying, and when he left, I asked my brother what happened. Apparently, his boyfriend just found out his parents are divorcing. I told him I was sorry for his boyfriend, but I asked him not to have him around my kids until we were home, and just because they were asleep doesn't change the fact, because anything could have happened. We got into a bit of an argument with him defending himself, and I ended up telling him that I felt extremely disrespected and worried for my kids because he wasn't sticking to our agreement, and I have no idea how many times he's had people in the house without permission. I told him, unfortunately, he's going to need to find another place to stay. I have kids to look after, and they come first. We don't take much rent off him, so he's got $15,000 in his bank account. He's not running a risk of being homeless. I told him he had until the end of March to find a place, and until he does his regular duties stand. He started crying and apologizing and asking if he could stay, so I told him I wasn't disowning him like our parents did. He just can't live here anymore. My husband says I was a complete jerk and I need to tell him he's allowed to stay. He said he called first, so he's most likely never had anyone else over without permission, and he'd be a pretty bad boyfriend if he wasn't there as support. I feel like I may be the jerk, because my husband is usually tight on the rules, and even he's willing to bend them for this. So, am I the jerk? Am I the jerk for telling my stepmom she needed to move out in a few months? My dad married my stepmom 7 years ago. She's not a bad woman, and she's not a gold digger either. She and my dad are legitimately in love. However, my dad doesn't have much time left due to medical issues. He likely won't make it till summer. My dad and I weren't close. He was military, and if he wasn't gone, he was in a crappy mood. My mom was in the picture, but she wasn't a saint either, so I was raised by my grandparents in their home. Neither of my parents could tell you my birthday 3 years ago to give you an idea of it. I don't hate either of my parents, but I don't really recognize them as my parents either. My dad has been a much better dad to my stepmom's son, which is good, and I'm grateful for that. However, I don't feel a bond with my stepbrother or stepmom either. When my grandma passed, she left me her home and her will, as that was what my grandparents wanted. My dad and his wife moved in with my permission while I was away at school. It was no secret that I intended to move back and live alone in my home, which has caused some conflicts in the past. This past weekend, while I was studying, stepmom sent me an email filling me in on dad again, telling me about her layoff and asking what my plans were after this last semester. So I told her I was returning home and had a job lined up with an old friend. Stepmom asked if I felt it would be crowded there, and I reminded her that it was my home, so if anyone was uncomfortable, they would need to relocate. Stepmom pushed back a little, and I reminded her again the home was mine and that they needed to be ready to leave by summer's end, as this is my last semester and I wanted to give them plenty of time to relocate. My dad ended up calling me later and tried to guilt me. However, I reminded him that he didn't really raise me, and I was under no obligation to help them as much as I already had. I called his wife after and told her that after my dad passed, she was gone for what she had just tried to do. The summer deal was off, and I would evict after 60 days, which is still more than required. I told her my dad chose a military career over his son, and when he wasn't lacing his boots, he was yelling at me or throwing stuff. Stepmom brought her child's education into it because they couldn't afford to live in a good school district when this was over, but I told her neither he or she was my concern. I told my friends about this, and they all thought I was right because of what I've already done for them and what my dad did in the past. They have said the stepmother is just another person in the world, and it sucks for her, but you can't set yourself on fire to keep them warm. What do you guys think? Am I the jerk?
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.